All right, we're back with the pinch cup, and we've let it dry a little bit so that it's a little sturdier and it can support its own weight. You got to be careful. You're not going to leave it sitting like this for a long period of time because this is a tiny little foot, and it could squish into the bottom of the form. You also want to be careful when you spray this that you don't waterlog this and turn it into mush because it's a pretty heavy cup sitting on top of that. What we're going to do today is to learn how to refine the rim and to smooth out some of the exterior. Remember, smooth is probably the most work for someone working in clay, and it's probably the least interesting to look at. A little bit of smooth is nice. A whole smooth pinch cup is quite boring in my opinion, and you have to do a lot of work and get the glaze to do the heavy lifting to keep this pot interesting. Okay, what I'm going to do first is refine my rim. This rim, we call it a kissable rim. If you wanted to drink out of this big chunky rim would be kind of annoying. It wouldn't feel good to drink. I think of a wine glass or a glass that's nice or a coffee mug. They have a little bit thinner rim than this. It doesn't have to be razor thin. But what I'm going to do is use my thumb again because it's the right shape, and I'll put it up against the rim of the cup, and I'm going to come around and just squeeze. And just little squeezes. It's going to crack some more, of course. And look at what I can do here is just run my thumb in a little arc. That's nice. It's able to conform to the side of the mug, and I can do all my work right from there. You can see already, that's a lot nicer than that chunky rim that I had before. Some of you will notice, when you turn it sideways that your rim goes like this, or one side's a little higher. In those cases, you can use your needle tool to zip the little high point off. If it's not quite that far off, what I do is I hold it in my hands like this, and I'll give it a couple taps on the table, and that usually evens it out really nicely. Okay, so back to smoothing the rim and smoothing the inside. Just pulling my hand across. You could leave some texture on the inside if you think that would be more interesting. You look at hand-thrown bowls on the wheel. Some of them have a little swirl on the bottom or a little decoration right down here. I don't know, sometimes that works out. Sometimes the glaze that you use will flow and move down there and block it. I don't know, it's up to you. Experiment, try new things. Okay, so we're moving our way all the way around here, and it's looking, I'm going to support it and cheat a little bit here and make sure that it's level with the table. I don't want the top to be kind of tilted to one side. So I'm going to leave it like that for a second and just pinch a little bit around the rim. A refined rim is important. When you thin the rim out, you thin the whole piece. And what I mean is, when people look at it, they can't tell how thick it is down here. They can only see this. So what our human brain assumes is that the whole thing is that thin. So when you thin the rim, you thin the whole piece. You kind of keep that in mind. The rim is really important to the structure of the whole piece. So I'm happy with that. It's a nice looking rim. You kind of start to round it out. It's still kind of squishy. And at this stage, if you wanted to make it into more of an oval or more of a square shape, you could easily do that. Keep it round for now. And now we're going to return back to the base. The base can be a little chunkier. It's a base. When we set it down on a granite countertop, we don't want it to chip. We want it to be a hardy base, but not to have any sharp points. Because when you set it down on Aunt Gertie's coffee table, you don't want it to scratch the darn thing up. Okay, this looks pretty good. Now it's kind of mushy in between, I don't know, it's like mushy. There's kind of like not as much definition between the base and the body. And so what I'm going to do is for the first time grab a tool and come in and create a little more definition. What I'm going to do is just rock this around, rocking around the Christmas tree. We're going to rock this around the base. help narrow it. If you keep going with this, you'll eventually pop this right off the bottom. So be careful how far you push that. And I'm just going to smooth out the crease that created. You can see there's a little bit of a fold. Smooth here. And then even go one step further and create a little decorative ring. This little knife edge on here, if I rock it in a straight line, going across. If you're lucky, you'll get it to connect on the other side. There's the bottom one. Now I'll do the top one just a little bit higher than that first one. And notice I'm supporting the piece. I'm cradling it like a little baby in my other hand. I'm not laying it on the table and rolling it all over the place, not squeezing it with my hands. It takes a little coordination to get used to that, being careful with the clay. But again, if you're lucky, you'll come back on the other side and find that you connect with where you started. Okay? I think that looks pretty nice. Now, some people that are obsessed with smoothness, you can start to come in and if you grab your metal rib and put a bend in it, like this, you can come in and start to pull it across the side of your piece. Be gentle and support it with your other hand, but you can get a little more smoothness out of your work if you do that. And this is before I stamp, so I'm not going to be too careful with this. I'm not going to obsess over it and try to get everything nice and smooth, because I'm just going to stamp over it anyway. This is the time for detailing. And if it's too squishy, don't feel bad about stopping here and letting it dry some more. If you feel like you're damaging it and every time you flip it over there's new cracks in the rim, give it a couple of sprays, or just stop, do one final, make sure it's round type of forming, and then just put it under a little bit of a fan or leave it unwrapped for a while, work on your other pinch cup. But you need to learn how to control the wetness of the clay. Okay, I found a nice stamp. It's got a little design on it. So now what I'm going to do is start to create a stamp pattern. It's important when you stamp that you support from the other side with your finger as you stamp in. And what I like to do, you might get a couple cracks here and there. It's evenly spaced as I go. Try to keep them on the same line and support from the back each time you stamp. Then we can move down to the next row and kind of make a brick-like pattern. See that starting to happen? The trick with the stamping is to remember you're eventually going to glaze this. And if you don't go deep enough with the stamp, and you don't do this little rocking motion, you're not going to get a good impression. Okay? But you want them all to be about the same depth. Now the stamping is going to distort it a little bit, so you're going to have to come back in after the stamping and re-round it and re-smooth the cracks that are happening up along the rim. But eventually you'll have a nice design. I might only do 2 rows here. You might think about going top to bottom and then turning and doing it on the points of the compass. It's up to you. This is really the fun part, detailing it, making it perfect before you put it in back. Of course, in the bottom, in here, you want to sign it and put your hour number so that you can get the work back when it's done being fired. Of course, always run it past me when you think that you're done before it dries, so that I can give you some final pointers, input, help you straighten out a rim here and there. But it's important that you let me